Today's story takes us to Chicago.
My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 27 years old, and at 2 in the morning, my parents were outside my apartment door pounding so hard the hallway walls shook. My mother was sobbing. My father kept yelling my name, and someone behind them screamed, "We were joking. Claire, open the door, please." But 6 hours earlier, they had laughed while I stood in their kitchen holding pieces of my own face in my hands. I had gone home for New Year's, thinking maybe distance had softened them. Maybe time had done what love never seemed able to do in that house. Instead, I found a black trash bag beside the island, half open, stuffed with torn photographs, school portraits, graduation pictures, the Polaroid from my first apartment, even the photo booth strip I'd kept from when I was 10. Every version of me they had ever framed, folded, ripped, and dumped like spoiled leftovers. My mother didn't even look embarrassed when I pulled them out. She just sipped her wine and said, "We're redecorating. No point keeping pictures of our biggest mistake." From the den, my sister laughed and called out, "She still shows up like we actually want her here." Then my aunt added, "We've got a betting pool on when she'll finally get the hint." A second later, my mother went further. "We turned her old room into storage, more useful than she ever was." Everybody laughed, loud, comfortable, practiced. I smiled, tied the trash bag shut, took it out myself, and walked to my car without raising my voice once. They thought that meant they had won. They didn't know I had just taken the one thing out of that house that could ruin them. Before I tell you what was buried in that trash, and why they were begging outside my door by 2 a.m., tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The drive back to Chicago should have taken 40 minutes, but I sat parked 3 blocks away from their house for nearly 20 before I even turned the key. My hands weren't shaking because of the insult. That part was old, familiar, predictable. What got to me was the carelessness of it, the ease. As if destroying me had become such a family tradition, they didn't even notice when they were doing it anymore. I finally pulled onto the road with a trash bag on the passenger seat and one torn picture resting on top. A kindergarten photo with a missing corner where my mother's fingernail had ripped straight through my shoulder. At a red light, I looked deeper into the bag, expecting only more pieces of my face. Instead, I found something else mixed in with the photos. 3 old mini cassette tapes, a cracked digital recorder, and a bank envelope with my father's handwriting on it. That made me stop breathing for a second. I knew those tapes. Years ago, before I became an archival audio engineer, I used to label everything in that house because no one else cared enough to keep records straight. Birthday speeches, mortgage calls, my grandfather's voice memos. Drunk family arguments they forgot I could hear from the stairs. I used to save sound because it felt safer than memory. Memory could be denied. Sound couldn't. When I got home, I spread everything across my dining table and started sorting. Torn photos on the left, tapes in the middle, envelope on the right. Inside the envelope were late notices, a home equity statement, 2 unpaid tax letters, and a copy of a transfer form with my father's signature half finished and my mother's notary page attached. They weren't just in trouble. They were drowning. And suddenly the jokes at dinner made sense. The new hardwood floors, the redecorating, the eagerness to erase me from the walls. They weren't refreshing the house. They were staging it, getting ready to sell. What they didn't know was that for almost 3 years, I had quietly paid several overdue bills tied to that property through a third-party account after my grandfather asked me, begged me, not to let the family home collapse while he was sick. I did it because he had once whispered to me, "You're the only one in this family who hears what people really say." After he died, I kept helping. Not because they deserved it, because I was stupid enough to believe maybe one day they'd stop treating me like a scar they regretted. That night, staring at those letters, I realized something brutal. They had mocked me with my own money, keeping the lights on behind them. So I opened my laptop, logged into every account I had used to shield them, and ended every transfer. Property tax cushion, gone. Emergency utility float, gone. Mortgage gap auto payment, gone. Insurance bridge, gone. Then I did what I do better than anyone. I restored sound. I cleaned the static from the old tapes, digitized the files, and listened. By midnight, I had my mother joking with my aunt about milking Claire until Walter dies. I had my father laughing that I was good for silent money and nothing else. I had my sister saying they should keep pretending to need space until I covers the spring arrears too. And on the newest file, recorded by accident when the digital recorder had apparently been tossed in a junk drawer and activated, I heard them discussing the sale of the house. Plus a lie they planned to tell the rest of the family about why they were desperate for cash. They were going to say I had promised to buy the house for them, then betrayed them. That was the moment I stopped being hurt and started being precise. You can survive cruelty for years. What changes you is hearing proof that the cruelty was strategic. At 9:13 the next morning, my sister called. I let it ring twice before answering. Claire, she said, stretching my name like she was doing me a favor. Mom thinks you took something by accident. I looked at the tapes lined up beside my keyboard. Did I? I asked. Don't start, she snapped. You always make everything dramatic. There it was. Not concern, not apology. Just the family script in a new outfit. What exactly am I accused of taking? I asked. She hesitated. Some old recordings. Dad needs them. For what? Silence. Then, why do you care? I almost laughed. For years, Paige had been their golden child in a polished leather jacket, always camera ready, always protected, always one promotion, one engagement, one brunch away from being introduced as proof that the Bennett family was doing perfectly fine. She worked in luxury residential sales and talked like every conversation was a closing pitch. Even her cruelty had staging. I care, I said, because last night your family tore up my photographs and laughed while I stood there. So if anyone wants anything from me today, they can start with the truth. Her voice hardened instantly. You're unbelievable. You know they're under pressure. I know exactly how much pressure, I said. I've been removing it for years. Dead silence. Then, quieter. What are you talking about? The taxes, the mortgage gaps, the utilities, the insurance. Grandpa asked me to keep the house stable while he was sick. I did. After he died, I kept doing it. Every time Dad missed a payment. Every time Mom overspent and called it temporary. Every time you all looked at me like I was useless, my money kept that place from sliding into foreclosure. She inhaled sharply, and for the first time in her life, Paige had nothing ready. That's not possible, she said. Ask Dad about the third-party transfers routed through Bennett Property Reserve. Ask Mom why she knew the lights never got cut off after 2 final notices. Ask yourself why your precious family suddenly called me sensitive every time I asked a basic question. Her tone shifted from disbelief to fear. Claire, if you stop that now. I already did. She started talking faster. You can't do that without warning. Interesting, I said. No one warned me before shredding my childhood. It was a joke. That line is expired. You're really going to tank Mom and Dad over hurt feelings? She hissed. Hurt feelings. That's what people call damage when they've never had to carry it. No, I said calmly. I'm declining to keep financing people who call me their biggest mistake. She tried a different tactic immediately. Meet me for coffee. Why? Because this is bigger than you being emotional. Then say the real reason. A pause. Because the house deal falls apart if those accounts lapse. There it was. Not love, not family, exposure. I agreed to meet. Not because I needed explanation, but because I wanted to see which version of desperation they would wear in public. We met at a cafe in Lincoln Square where Paige arrived 10 minutes late. Overpriced coat, perfect makeup, eyes red from either crying or strategic rehearsal. She didn't sit before speaking. Dad's bridge lender pulled back this morning. If the arrears show up before closing, the buyer walks. I stirred my coffee. That sounds stressful. Claire. She leaned in. Be serious. I am. She dropped her voice. Mom said terrible things. Fine, we all did. I'm not defending it. But if this sale collapses, they lose everything. Not everything, I corrected. Just the house they were preparing to sell while blaming me. She froze. How did you know that? I let that sit. Then I told her about the recordings. Not all of them. Enough. Her face actually drained. You recorded us? No. You people recorded yourselves and forgot I know how to restore damaged audio. You can't use family conversations like that. Why not? You used family as a business model. She stared at me like she was seeing an unfamiliar language. I leaned back and said the part I'd never said out loud before. Do you know what the worst part was, Paige? Not being insulted, not being compared. It was paying to preserve a home where I was spoken about like mold behind the walls. She rubbed both hands over her face. So what do you want? I had asked myself that all night. Revenge? Yes. But more than that, accuracy. I want the lie to die before it leaves that house, I said. No one says I abandoned this family. No one says I promised anything I didn't. And if any of you try it, I release everything. You would destroy us. No, I said. I would stop protecting you. If the person who hurt you the most suddenly apologized, only because they were losing something valuable, what would you do? By late afternoon, the extended family group chat was already moving. Denise Mercer, my mother's sister, professional gossip, amateur martyr, full-time collector of other people's humiliation, posted a syrupy message about how some daughters forget who sacrificed for them. No names, no need. That woman had built an entire social life out of suggestive cruelty. Then my mother added a crying emoji and wrote, "Some of us are experiencing betrayal we never imagined." Paige had clearly gone home and said enough to panic them, but not enough to stop the performance. They still thought they could get ahead of the truth by framing the story first. They forgot I had grown up in that house too. I knew every exit they preferred, every witness they liked to arrange, every version of innocence they rehearsed. So when Denise announced a spontaneous family dinner that night at her place, I went. Not to reconcile, to end the guessing game. Her house in Oak Park was packed before 7. Cousins in the kitchen, uncles near the TV, women circulating charcuterie and judgment in equal portions. My mother stood by the island wearing grief like costume jewelry. My father avoided my eyes. Paige looked sick. Denise smiled the second I walked in, the way people smile before they light a match. "Claire," she sang, "so nice of you to come. We weren't sure you still considered yourself part of this family." A few people laughed nervously. I took off my coat, set my purse down, and said, "That depends. Is this the part where you all pretend I'm unstable? Or the part where you ask me to keep funding the house sale?" The room didn't just go quiet, it snapped quiet. Denise's smile flickered. My mother made the mistake of recovering first. "What are you talking about?" she asked, hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "Exactly what you think." I took my phone out, opened a document, and read the arrears amounts out loud. County taxes, utility backlog, insurance lapse risk. 2 bridge requests. Then I named the date of each payment I had covered for them under the reserve account my grandfather asked me to maintain. One cousin actually whispered, "Wait, Claire was paying that?" My father finally found his voice. "This is private." "So were my photographs," I said. "Until you threw them in the trash like party confetti." Denise stepped in immediately. "There must be some misunderstanding." "No," I said. "There's finally enough understanding." My mother tried anger next. "You're doing this to embarrass us." "No, you did that when you called me your biggest mistake in front of half the room last night." That landed. Not because they believed me, they already did, but because several people there had known my mother long enough to recognize the exact wording. Paige shut her eyes. My aunt tried one last trick. Even if feelings were hurt, airing family finances like this is cruel. I laughed, once, softly. "Denise, you literally made a betting pool about when I'd get the hint. Let's make another one. How long did you think you could insult me before the person paying your sister's emergency bills got tired?" A few heads turned so sharply toward Denise, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I said the sentence I'd been building all day. "Here's my bet. Within 24 hours, this family will either tell the truth about me, or it will hear itself tell the truth out loud." My father lunged verbally before physically, voice booming. "You ungrateful little—" "Careful," I said, lifting my phone. I have audio. He stopped. My mother went white. Denise stopped breathing long enough to look human. I didn't play the recording. I didn't need to. Sometimes power isn't using the blade. It's placing it on the table where everyone can see it. I picked up my purse and looked around the room at people who had watched me be minimized for years because it kept dinner easy. All of you heard jokes, I said. Not one of you asked who was paying the price to keep them funny. Then I walked out into the freezing night with 30 pairs of eyes burning into my back, and for the first time in my life, none of them felt bigger than me. I spent the next several hours doing something my family had never imagined I was capable of, documenting everything. Not dramatic screenshots with vague captions, not emotional voicemails, evidence, clean timelines, bank confirmations, audio restoration logs, copies of notices, file hashes. I work with contested recordings and historical sound archives. Chain of custody is practically a reflex for me. By 11 that night, I had built a private folder so airtight no one could call it a meltdown. At 11:26, my father left a voicemail saying I was sick and trying to kill the family. At 11:41, my mother texted, "Whatever you think you heard, families say things in frustration." At 11:49, Denise sent the line that told me panic had fully arrived. "Please do not make temporary emotions permanent." Temporary emotions. That was rich, coming from people who had made a career out of permanent scars. Then at 12:07, Paige called again, and this time she was crying for real. Not elegant, not staged. Harsh, broken crying that sounded like someone finally looking at the math without a filter. "The buyer asked for proof of cleared arrears," she said. "Dad can't provide it. He tried to shift money from the retirement account, but the penalty is too high. Mom thought Denise could cover a short bridge, but Denise doesn't have what she claimed. And there's more." I stayed quiet. "Dad used part of Grandpa's estate reserve already," she whispered. "He said it was temporary. It wasn't." That hit me harder than I expected. My grandfather had not been wealthy, but he had been careful, methodical. The kind of man who sharpened pencils with a knife because he didn't trust waste. If my father had siphoned anything from the reserve Walter meant as stability, it wasn't just financial recklessness. It was desecration. "How much?" I asked. She told me. I closed my eyes. It explained the urgency, the sale, the lies, the theater. They weren't just embarrassed. They were cornered. "Claire, please," Paige said. "I know I don't deserve to ask, but if this gets out, Dad's reputation is over. Mom will never recover socially. Denise is already trying to blame everything on you. They're saying you manipulated Grandpa when he was sick." I actually smiled at that. Weak people always reach for the dead when the living stop cooperating. "Do they have that in writing yet?" I asked. "Not publicly." "Good. Tell them if my name is attached to elder manipulation, fraud, abandonment, or any version of promised and refused. I release the restored files, the payment history, and the transfer trail by sunrise." "Please don't do that." "Then stop them." "I can't control Mom." "That's funny," I said. "For years, all of you seemed perfectly able to control the story when it was me being humiliated." She was silent so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said something I will always remember. "You know what the worst part is? I think they really believed you'd keep helping no matter what they said." That was it. The family business model in one sentence. Not love, not respect. Assumed endurance. I told her I was done being the emergency contact for people who treated me like debris. Around 1:30, one of my cousins texted privately, "Is it true you were covering the house?" I responded with a single screenshot. One payment confirmation, nothing more. He replied with 3 words. "Oh my God." By 1:42, another cousin sent, "Aunt Denise is spiraling." At 1:51, the family chat went silent. And at 1:58, the pounding began. It was violent enough to rattle the coat hooks by my door. Then my mother's voice tore through the hallway. "Claire, open the door, please." My father shouted next, but he sounded different than he had earlier. Not furious, fractured. "We need to talk before you do something you can't take back." Behind them, I heard Denise crying, genuinely crying now, and Paige saying, "Please, just let us in." I walked to the door without opening it and looked through the peephole. There they were. My mother in last night's coat, mascara streaked. My father ashen, jaw tight, hand braced against the frame. Denise clutching her scarf like a noose. Paige with both palms over her mouth. My family, the people who had spent years turning me into a punchline, were standing outside my apartment at 2 in the morning looking like the punchline had finally turned around. "We were joking," my mother sobbed. "Please answer, we're your family. Don't destroy us." I kept the chain on, opened the door 2 inches, and said, "Now you want to use that word?" The hallway light was unforgiving. It flattened everyone. Took away status, posture, the little props people hide behind. My mother reached for the door immediately, but the chain stopped her. "Claire, sweetheart." "Don't," I said. She flinched like I had slapped her. Good. Let the word hurt for once. My father stepped forward, trying to reclaim authority through tone. "This has gone far enough." "You're right," I said. "It has. That's why you're out here." Denise started crying harder. "We are not bad people." I looked at her for a long second. That sentence only appears when someone knows exactly how they've been behaving. Paige whispered, "Claire, please let us explain. You had 27 years. My mother pressed both hands together like prayer. "We said awful things. We were stressed. The house, your grandfather's paperwork, the buyer, everything piled up. We lashed out. That doesn't mean we meant it." "You framed me as a mistake for years," I said. At what point was that not meant?" My father's voice rose. "You are taking private family ugliness and weaponizing it publicly." "No, I'm refusing to keep paying for it privately." That shut him up again. He hated facts because they offered nothing to dominate. Denise tried another angle. "If this gets outside the family, Richard could face questions. Evelyn could lose standing at church. Paige's clients." I cut in. "And where, exactly, was this concern for reputational damage when you all mocked me in front of relatives?" No answer, because there wasn't one. My mother finally said the quiet part out loud. "Tell us what you want." There it was, the sentence desperate people reach when manipulation fails. Not "what do you need?" Not "how do we fix this?" What do you want? Transaction language, home language. I had already decided. "First," I said, "you stop lying. Tonight. Not tomorrow morning, not after consulting each other. Tonight." In the family group chat and individually to everyone who was at Denise's house, you will state that I did not abandon you, did not promise to buy the house, did not manipulate Grandpa, and did not refuse to help after making commitments. You will state that I privately covered multiple property-related costs for years and that your treatment of me was cruel. My father recoiled. "Absolutely not." "Then go home." My mother grabbed his sleeve so fast it frightened even him. "Second," I continued, "you admit that Grandpa's reserve was used without proper disclosure." My father exploded. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know the transfer amounts, the dates, and the language you used on tape when you said, 'We'll put it back before Claire notices.'" He stopped moving. Paige started crying again, but softer this time, like grief finally had a name. "Third," I said, and this was the part that mattered most to me, "you do not contact my employer, my friends, or anyone in my building with any version of this story. If one whisper reaches my professional life, I release everything beyond the family." Denise shook her head frantically. Public humiliation is too far. I almost laughed at the perfection of that sentence coming from her mouth. No. Public humiliation was turning me into a sport. My mother's knees actually buckled a little, and Paige caught her elbow. "Claire," my mother whispered, "please don't take everything from us." "I didn't," I said. "You built a life on the assumption I would absorb every blow and still show up with a check. I'm just stepping out of the line of fire." My father stared at me, not angry anymore, terrified. That was new. He lowered his voice. "If we do this, if we say all of that, there is no coming back." I looked straight at him. "Exactly." Silence stretched. Then something happened I did not expect. Paige turned to them, not to me, to them, and said, "Do it." My mother blinked. "Paige, do it," she repeated stronger. "I've spent my whole life helping you dress things up. I'm done. She's right." My father snapped. "You don't understand the consequences." Paige laughed once, broken and ugly. "No, Dad. Claire understood the consequences every time we handed them to her." That was the first honest thing my sister had ever said in defense of me, and it came at 2:11 a.m. in a hallway that smelled like winter dust and panic. My mother looked from one child to the other and seemed to realize, maybe for the first time, that the version of this family centered around her comfort was over. She nodded. Barely. "I'll write it." "Now," I said. "Here." They typed while standing outside my apartment. My mother first, then Paige. Then, after 5 full minutes of refusing, my father. Denise asked if her message could be less specific. I told her no. When they were done, I made them read each one out loud through the gap in the door. Every lie corrected. Every dodge tightened. Every softening removed. When the messages finally went out, my phone lit up like a fire starting in dry grass. Cousins, in-laws, 2 people from church. One family friend who simply wrote, "I had no idea." My mother heard the incoming vibrations from inside my apartment and started sobbing again. "Are you happy now?" she asked. I thought about that honestly. "No," I said, "but I'm no longer available for your version of unhappy." They left my building a little after 2:30 in the morning with their shoulders collapsed and their story no longer under their control. I didn't sleep after that. I sat at my kitchen table, looked at the torn photographs spread in neat stacks, and listened as a message after message came in. Some were shocked, some apologetic, some shamelessly curious. A few relatives tried to explain that they had always felt something was off, which is what cowards say when truth arrives after safety. By sunrise, Denise had already been removed from 2 volunteer committees after one of her own friends saw the family messages and connected them to a years-long pattern of jokes she had made about me in public. My mother called once at 7:08. I didn't answer. My father didn't call at all. Men like him go quiet when bluster stops working. Silence is the only authority they think still looks dignified. Paige texted at 8:14. "I'm moving the rest of Grandpa's documents out of the house today. You were right." I didn't reply immediately. I was too busy doing the thing I should have done years earlier, choosing what happened next based on my peace, instead of their panic. Over the following week, the fallout spread in exactly the way they had feared and I had predicted. The buyer delayed, then renegotiated brutally after learning the house finances were unstable. My father had to disclose more than he planned. My mother's social circle, once fed by curated charm and selective victimhood, thinned overnight. Denise became a cautionary tale in her own orbit, the woman who mistook cruelty for wit, until people finally compared notes. And me? I went to work. I restored a 1968 city council tape on Monday, delivered deposition cleaning files on Tuesday, and had lunch with colleagues on Wednesday who knew nothing about the hallway scene, except that I seemed lighter. That was the strangest part. Revenge, the real kind, doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like breathing in a room after someone opens the window. A week later, Paige asked to meet. We sat on a bench near Montrose Harbor with coffee going cold in our hands and the lake looking like hammered steel. She told me my parents were probably going to lose more on the sale than they'd admitted. She told me my father had tried to blame everyone in sequence: market timing, Grandpa's decline, my temper, Denise's mouth, before finally sitting down and saying nothing for nearly an hour. She told me my mother had read the messages she sent that night at least 30 times and cried every time she got to the words cruel and mistake. Then Paige said, "I'm not asking you to save them." I turned to look at her. "Good." She nodded. "I just needed you to know I'm not helping them lie anymore." That mattered. Not because it repaired anything instantly, but because truth spoken by someone who benefited from the lie costs more. Over the next month, I made exactly one concession. Not money, not rescue. I agreed to review Grandpa's remaining paperwork, and identify what had legally belonged to his estate reserve versus what my father had blurred into household expenses. I did it for Walter, not for them. And I did it with conditions written in email. No surprise visits, no emotional ambushes, no requests for loans, no family emergencies that were really consequences in costume. My mother wrote back a single sentence. We understand. I'm not sure she did. Maybe she only understood loss. Sometimes that has to be enough. People always ask stories like this to choose a moral that makes everyone comfortable. Reconciliation, grace, family unity. But that isn't always the honest ending. So here is the honest one. I did not take them back the way they wanted. I did not rush into tearful holidays or pretend accountability erased history. I did not let the word family become a crowbar used against my boundaries ever again. I kept my distance. I answered when necessary. I stayed gone when peace required it. And when my mother sent a box of newly framed copies of the childhood photos they had destroyed, I didn't cry. I took out one frame, set it on my shelf, and donated the rest. Because replacement is not restoration. That, more than anything, was the lesson they had to learn too late. You can apologize for breaking something, but you do not get to decide how much of it comes back. The night they stood outside my door at 2 a.m., they thought they were begging me not to destroy them. What they were really begging for was a return to the arrangement where I hurt quietly and financed the illusion. That arrangement died in my hallway, and if there is any lesson worth keeping from all of this, it's this. Respecting yourself is not selfish. Walking away from toxic family is not cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful form of love is the kind you finally give yourself when you stop letting blood ties excuse repeated harm. Family does not get unlimited access to wound you just because they helped name you. You are allowed to choose peace over loyalty, truth over performance, and distance over damage. Some people only learn your value when losing access to you becomes expensive. So tell me honestly, would you cut off family if they kept hurting you and calling it love? And what keeps so many people holding on to toxic relationships just because they're family?
In my opinion, this story is not just about revenge, it's about awakening. What made Claire powerful wasn't anger alone, but the moment she finally understood her value and stopped letting toxic family members define it for her. That's what makes the story meaningful. Sometimes the strongest response is not yelling, but walking away with dignity and truth on your side. Family should be a place of respect, not repeated humiliation. I think many people will relate to the pain of being taken for granted by the people closest to them. So, what about you? Would you forgive a family that treated you this way, or would you choose distance and peace?